Strategy is a term that we sometimes struggle to accurately define. Many games fall under the strategy genre, but there's differences within them. XCOM is a strategy game, for example, but the squad command section of the game is tactics, not strategy. The difference is confusing, but Sun Tzu says it best. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Of course, like most historical figures, Sun Tzu didn't actually say that. In all of my Google searching, I couldn't find who did. But the quote isn't wrong. Strategy is the grand picture, moving every piece until it all falls in line, and you win. Imperator Rome calls itself a grand strategy game, and to be entirely fair, it is. It's just not a good one. I'm Rimmy, and I'm here to talk about why I believe mana has hamstrung this game, and why it's a poor mechanic of a bygone era that should no longer be relied upon. To speed through a few things first, I'm no game critic nor reviewer, I just play these games a lot, have played them for a long time, and enjoy looking into the mechanics behind a game, or a tabletop system, or a board game. Additionally, I'm not a fan of Europa Universalis 4. I don't believe it's a bad game, I just don't get much enjoyment from playing it. It may be that if you love EU4, you'll love Imperator as being more of the same, though a bit regressed. And for full disclosure, back in May of 2018, I saw a presentation of the game by its designer Johan before it was announced, with myself and some other YouTubers at PDXCon 2018. Shortly after it was then announced, and we could talk about what we saw. Additionally, I was provided my copy of Imperator for free by Paradox. And lastly, to cover an argument I know will arise, no, this game is not a good foundation, nor is it a good base game for a better game in the future. You may think that, but I'm not talking about the future, I'm talking about the game that is being sold now. It is asking for money on its own merits, and I am going to judge it on its own merits. DLC that makes the game better in the future does not make the game good now. Right, enough of that. Let's get straight into the biggest, meatiest topic. That strategy preamble wasn't just for a fancy opening, though that certainly worked for it. I needed you all to understand what strategy was before I could explain why mana inherently defeats the core idea of it. So now we need to define mana. Mana, for those of you who don't know, is shorthand for the various monarch powers in Paradox games and related resources. Diplomatic power is bird mana. Military power, sword mana. In Imperator, we have brew mana, salad mana, rolling pin mana, and praise the sun mana. Generally, mana is defined by being an obfuscated or unclear resource that you gain based on your monarch's skills, and they are then spent on a specific group of actions within the game. Mana is controversial at best and was repeatedly brought up as more and more dev diaries regarding Imperator were revealed. I consider it anti-strategy because the essence of strategy is planning ahead. It's looking at all of the pieces, imagining where they will be a certain while from now, and then executing your choice. Mana defeats this entirely. Mana counts up as your monarch adds points into it. There are a few other methods to get mana, but your monarch is always the primary method of income, another problem to touch on later. Eventually you'll hit the magical limit of what you want to do, fabricate a war goal, move a citizen, hire mercenaries. But then, most often, it happens instantly. If it's not immediately obvious to you why this is an issue, let me explain. The very idea of strategy is planning ahead, making choices long before you can see the outcome. When I order a squad to move up a ridge in armor and I order them to get eyes on an enemy position, I know that I won't have access to that squad for a little while. They are in motion, they are moving, they are busy, and they can't be used for something else. It's that time delay that separates a strategy game from, say, a puzzle game. But back to mana. Mana is meant to represent the work your nation does in achieving those goals. So, let's say for example that you were fabricating a war goal. All of a sudden the nation you were fabricating on allies with a bigger one, and you decide, actually, all of these mana points, which were my spies setting up a reason to invade, or my diplomats getting a Cassius Belli to invade their nation, was actually my government reshuffling our priorities, and look, we're more diplomatic now. The strategy is gone. I was able to simply flip at the drop of a hat with no penalty. It's not that you can't change strategy, and strategy isn't about reaction. In fact, strategy is very much about reacting as new situations arise. But with no penalty, there's no reason to plan ahead. I can simply look at the situation once I have the mana and then decide what I want to do, which removes any penalty from actually deploying my resources. Of course, the roleplay behind what those points actually mean is completely gone unless you'd like to assume that your ruler has a time machine and can go back a few months and tell everyone what he actually wants in the future. Another main element of strategy is weighing choices. Even if they are instant, sometimes you'll have to choose between fabricating a war goal or changing your government's policies, as these both use the same mana type. We then hit the next inherent problem of mana. It's meant to be specific for both gameplay and roleplay, or logical reasons. For example, military mana shouldn't change your government, though EU4 has more than a few issues of mana not making a lot of sense in certain areas. But if mana is too specific, it ends up not even being a choice, but rather a timer. No mechanic better represents this than the woefully poor religious mechanics in Imperator. Religion in Imperator primarily consists of pressing one button every 5 years, between a choice of 8 to get an ongoing buff until the next time you have to press that button. Ironically, this is actually more strategic than the other choices in the game. You need to stick with your choice for the next 5 years. If you decide to increase manpower but suddenly realize you need tax, you're stuck with the manpower buff. That is strategy. You should have planned ahead better and now you need to adapt to your new situation of having more manpower but not enough tax. But this also makes religious mana near useless, as the only other use is to increase stability or convert population to your religion. The game would genuinely be better off by simply having a 5-year timer until you can choose your next buff and getting rid of the useless resource. Now, I mentioned stability, so let's revisit that. Stability is a mechanic from EU4, meant to represent how stable your country is. It has some rather major effects, and losing a level of stability is generally considered rather serious, losing just 1 point. You get it for breaking truces, ruler death, and other terrible acts. A horrible noise plays, this big event has occurred, and you'll have to suffer with your choices. Unless you have a bunch of religious power saved up, of course, at which point you mash the sacrifice pig button, and suddenly your nation is more stable than ever, rejoicing and loving your rule. It's a brilliant way to utterly remove any impact or effect from what seems like a hard choice or a major event. Imagine if when you went to war, instead of actually fighting and dealing with the war, you simply pressed the spend manpower button 3 times and the war was over in an instant. It doesn't make any sense in the story the game is telling you, and as a mechanic, it's just boring. Oh, sorry, I forgot. You can gain war exhaustion, and your people are tired and hating this war, getting restless and angry until you stab some pigs, but with military mana instead. It uses the same sound effect. This is just low quality. Why has the game done this? Why am I stabbing a pig when it says invoke devotio? What? This instant reaction is one of the biggest problems with Imperator. It's scary how much you can change about your country. Completely moving populations, depopulating areas, converting slaves right up into ruling class citizens, showing the heathens the light of your religion, changing your government's path, throwing 3 religious ceremonies, all without unpausing the game. That means, in-game, no time has passed at all. Some reviews and players have mentioned how Imperator feels like a waiting game, and ironically it's done this because it removes the waiting. Instead of setting up some, say, spies to start working on a war goal and you know it'll be done sometime in the future, you simply wait until the mana bar is at 100% and then you press the big white button. By the way, the UI is god-awful, like a light theme on steroids. When I first saw it back in 2018, I hoped it would be better developed by the time it released, but dear God no. Regardless, this is a digression. So, you press the big white button and boom. Now if you have the mana, you can speed through this game, only ever slowing down for actually fighting wars. In fact, in a tribal game, I lacked technology the whole game, and as such I couldn't buy what's called inventions with my civic mana. But the moment I finally civilized and got tech, I instantly bought every single invention, because apparently all those tech points I'd been saving but couldn't use instantly became useful to me as everyone's brains exploded. But if you don't have the mana, your game comes to a grinding, sudden halt. You put it into 5 speed and simply wait, as without mana your country ceases to function. And therein lies one of my biggest problems with Imperator as a strategy game. It doesn't feel like a strategy video game, but a strategy board game. If you're unaware, Europa Universalis was originally a board game, and Imperator Rome is most definitely the bastard child of that game. And for a board game, mana makes great sense. It's a simple pile of tokens that you slowly build up, and then you spend on relevant actions. It's an easy, logical mechanic for a board game to represent actions it otherwise wouldn't be able to. It's much harder to represent a timer, or someone having a 5% chance every tick to convert in a board game than it is in a video game. And Imperator is a video game, which means there is so much more it could do. Why is it that when I go to manage my population, I spam click the convert and assimilate buttons like some manic collector? There's no choice here, it's just simple busy work that I have to do. By the by, the inability to convert or assimilate all is just poor design. You can use the quick interact mode, but even then you have to repeatedly click. Why is this in a brand new Paradox title? This is no indie dev, this is horrendous. Regardless, I spam click all of these citizens and suddenly they instantly love me and love my culture. As a side note made when recording this, I realized in my game that I had enough bonuses to the happiness of non-core culture citizens that spending mana and converting them to my culture actually lowered their happiness. I've wasted mana and ended up with a more upset population. This needs to be fixed or allow for me to convert my other citizens back to the foreign culture or tell me that this will occur, because I only noticed when I was actually filming footage. So tell me, why don't we remove the 20 mana cost from these actions and replace them with a timer or a focus instead? I could choose to focus on converting the heathens in this area and it decreases the time it takes for them to convert. It could be limited focuses much like in Victoria 2, or perhaps converting these heathens could cause issues, if I convert too many at once, unrest increases until an uprising occurs. Right there's a choice in a simple mechanic. Do I push my religion hard to gain more power and control and risk a heathen uprising? If you still desire your mana, it could be as simple as having 100 power that you then task out. Instead of waiting to gain this power, we dole it out as needed, wait until they're converted and then use it elsewhere. This way we still have the mana, but we can actually use it in a method that makes sense. Our missionaries are converting heathens, and they can't suddenly become priests conducting stability rituals. Larger nations could have a bigger base pool of the new mana, characters could influence it to make it bigger or smaller. It's the element of time, however, that is the most key. You can actually switch your governor focuses to convert culture and religion over time, but not to focus on any specific class of people, only to even the classes out, quite weirdly. The problem with this is threefold. First, the fact that my nation is completely static unless I give this order that suddenly people are allowed to become interested in changing religion. Second, that for some arcane reason, telling the governors that you employ to change their policies to do this is considered tyrannical. What? I've done this once to ask Roger over here to convert the damn heretics, and he calls me a tyrant because his king told him he had to do something. And lastly, it still costs mana, though ironically it only ever costs rolling pin mana, so considering that the religious sun god mana is largely useless and you'll always have loads of it, you're better off just instantly converting. And that holds true for all of them. It may be cheaper in the long run to slowly convert, but more likely than not you'll just have the mana to convert people as needed and instantly reap the benefits. And apart from occasionally having new citizens grow, this is the only way your nation can change organically, even though it actually isn't as you're still controlling it. Gone is the feeling of having an actual living country that you then influence in Victoria or CK2. Instead, I'm controlling the light switch to let people read about religion. It's either on or off, and I'm completely in control. Mana, as it stands today, is an old board game mechanic that Johan has somehow decided is still relevant, despite people's concerns with it in EU4. It takes what could be an intense planning strategy game about the ancient world and turns it into a game about watching 4 big magic numbers go up, spam clicking your way through a horde of buttons, and then getting to fight a war. A war you hope will last long enough so that you don't have to wait around afterwards for your magic numbers to go back up. They're nothing more than glorified timers. There's a good point that came up while I was editing this video. It was raised by one of the comments that I read during my research into Imperator. Now, I didn't address the argument that, oh, well, gold is mana, because if you believe that, you're a damned fool. However, this covers the point quite well. It mentions that players tend to have no issue with gold because it comes from a logical source, and if mana functioned the same, say getting military mana from maintaining a large army and fighting, similar to say Hearts of Iron 4's experience system, then would be far more accepting of it. The problem is that you can't influence your income no matter what you do. A nation like Sparta with a giant army will get no more military mana than any other nation. In a similar fashion, Rome gets the same mana income as some random tribal country, with again, the monarch being the only difference. This is an amazing point, however I will maintain that the instant nature of things remains an issue, even if we did have a different mana generation system. In Hearts of Iron 4 there is a warning period of time before a nation can declare war, which gives the opposing player time to prepare. In Imperator, war declarations are almost always near instant. Mana isn't Imperator's only problem, but this video is getting too long, so let's do a quick round. Your monarch is the primary way of getting all types of mana, because apparently when they die or get voted out, we execute all the scientists they had, or maybe they were literally the only scientists we had and we now have Gog the Thick trying to figure out how to make steel. The attrition is so bad that I had moments where I had armies starving in peacetime, and since you can't disband loyal cohorts, and I had no provinces with enough food to feed them, I had men just dying because they didn't want to leave the party. Money is remarkably useless apart from building one of 4 buildings. Even bribes are done with mana, not money, for some reason. There's only 4 buildings. The building screen doesn't tell me how useful a building will be when I build it. Should I build a granary or a training camp? I don't know, the game won't tell me. Fort movements and mechanics from EU4 still suck ass, and it never feels fun to have your armies sprint around in circles because forts apparently have giant force fields around them. Since the entire focus of this game is on warring, declaring more wars, increasing your blob, and going to more war, aggressive expansion is just a timeout bar. You get too much of it because you're doing too well, the game tells you to sit down and be bored for a bit, then you continue on winning anyway because it's not like it actually stopped you from snowballing. There is so little difference between countries that I literally have a barbarian senate as Albion, and I might as well be playing Rome. This event, why does this exist? Why would I ever choose the second option? This is stupid. Navies are nearly good as CK2 naval combat. Huh. For reference, you can choose to get plus 10% attack and minus 10% defense, or plus 10% defense and minus 10% attack. I am amazed at the strategic thinking I had to do here. Choosing tactics for armies is one of the few tactical decisions you can actually make in fighting a war, but unless I'm unaware of the ability, you can't actually find out what tactic your opponent is using to counter it without fighting them. Which leads to the hoi 4 situation of throwing one small unit of useless troops into battle to find out what the enemy has, then switching your tactics and actually fighting them. Most of the time, you'll just use the tactics with the highest percentage because a 0% tactic is near useless. Characters that are plotting against you can be entirely stopped either by bribing them or literally just removing them from their army. Colonization is actually one of the worst mechanics. You spam click to move citizens to the border until you have 10, then you colonize one province a year, then you spam click again to move 10 more citizens up. I had to do this for all of Ireland and it took forever. And many more. I could go on, and honestly I'd love to, but I'll leave it there. I was just hoping for so much more from this game, and the product delivered is just not up to the standards that consumers should expect from Paradox as an experienced, well-funded game company at this point. When Johan pitched the game to us, he said he'd taken all the best elements from all the Paradox games to create this title. The reality is quite different. We have the character dynamics of Crusader Kings with no way to actually get involved or interact with them. We have the war focus of Hearts of Iron with the lackluster combat system providing little fun in actually waging your wars. We have the manner and government of Europa Universalis without any of the politics or trade or choices that flavor it. And I won't even say we have the pop system of Victoria, because that is an insult thanks to how poorly this system is handled in comparison to Victoria 2. We end up with a game that has no central draw, only features from other games wrapped up in a new bundle and sold for 40 USD. But we're all aware that's not where it ends. I'll see you all when the first $20 DLC drops. Thank you all for watching. I'm aware this wasn't as jokey as my normal stuff and hell doesn't even fit the bill for what I normally make, but I needed to get it out there and said, I wish this game was good, but it just isn't. And it will take more than a few flavor packs and nation DLCs to change it. It's fundamentally resting on a bed of dull, old mechanics that belong on a table between friends, not in a video game of 2019. That's all to say for now. Let me know what you think down below. Have a good one, mates.